The central chamber of the Galactic Coalition gleamed with the cold efficiency that had become its hallmark. Representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered in tiered seating, their diverse physiologies accommodated by specialized environmental bubbles and support structures. At the center of it all stood Squad Commander Atrax, his chitinous exoskeleton reflecting the ambient light as he addressed the assembly. Esteemed representatives, Atrax's voice resonated through the translation matrix. The Vorak Imperium formally requests deployment rights to Earth's Montana region. Our analysis confirms it as the safest zone on the Class 12 Deathworld. High Counselor Zextra, a gaseous entity contained within a crystalline vessel, pulsed with skepticism. Commander Atrax, Earth has claimed 17 previous expeditions. What makes your proposal different? Atrax's mandibles clicked with confidence. Previous attempts failed because they underestimated Earth's danger. The Vorak are Deathworlders ourselves, born of the plasma storms of Voraxian Prime. We understand hostile environments. He gestured to the holographic display showing Montana's rolling plains. This region offers minimal native predators, stable climate patterns, and sparse human population, perfect for establishing our foothold. The assembly murmured. Earth remained the Coalition's most frustrating puzzle, a backwater planet whose primitive inhabitants somehow resisted all classification efforts. That they could survive on such a lethal world defied explanation. Your confidence is noted, Commander, said Zextra, and your force composition. 1,000 of our finest warriors, Atrax responded. Elite Deathworlders trained specifically for Earth conditions. We will secure the zone, establish a permanent outpost, and prove once and for all that Vorak superiority is not mere propaganda, but biological fact. After deliberation, the Coalition granted approval. As Atrax departed the chamber, Lieutenant Shura fell into step beside him. Unlike Atrax's burnished black exoskeleton, Shura's carapace bore the deep purple markings of the southern hives. 1,000 warriors seems excessive for a safe zone, Commander, Shura remarked, her mandibles twitching in what Atrax recognized as barely concealed amusement. The Coalition has underestimated Earth before, Atrax replied. I will not make the same mistake. Better to overwhelm with force than be overwhelmed by circumstance. Of course, Commander. Shura's compound eyes reflected the starlight as they boarded their vessel. Though I wonder if you're preparing for the wrong enemy. Earth's dangers may not be what we expect. Atrax dismissed her concern with a wave of his upper appendage. In 2 cycles, Lieutenant, we will stand victorious on Earth soil. The Vorak name will echo through Coalition space as the conquerors of the unconquerable. Shura simply nodded, but her silence carried more weight than any verbal response could. The journey to Earth took precisely 47 standard cycles. Atrax spent the time reviewing all available data on Earth's ecosystem, paying particular attention to the Montana region. The Coalition's reports were maddeningly vague about specific threats, but the casualties spoke volumes. 17 expeditions. Over 20,000 Coalition forces lost. No coherent explanation for their failures. As their ships entered Earth's atmosphere, Atrax addressed his assembled forces through the neural link. Warriors of Voraxian Prime. Today we make history. Earth has defeated lesser species, but they have never faced the Vorak. Our exoskeletons can withstand atmospheric pressure that would crush starships. Our neurotoxins can paralyze creatures 10 times our size. We are the apex predators of a world that makes Earth seem like a pleasure garden. Victory is not merely possible, it is inevitable. The deployment pods launched in perfect formation, 1,000 gleaming teardrops falling toward the Montana plains. Atrax's tactical display showed all pods on target, descent vectors nominal. As they pierced the cloud layer, the verdant expanse of the safe zone spread beneath them. Rolling grasslands, scattered copses of trees, a distant mountain range, all exactly as the intelligence reports had indicated. The pods landed with synchronized precision, forming a perfect defensive perimeter. Atrax was the first to emerge, his sensory apparatus immediately cataloging the environment. Oxygen content higher than Varaxian Prime, but within tolerance. Temperature a cool 15 degrees Celsius, practically refreshing compared to their homeworld's blistering heat. Gravity lighter than expected, which would enhance their already formidable physical capabilities. Perimeter secure, Commander, reported Sergeant Vell, a battle-scarred veteran whose left antenna had been replaced with a cybernetic enhancement. No immediate threats detected. Atrax felt a surge of satisfaction. Deploy the advanced scouts. Full sensor sweep of the immediate area. I want defensive emplacements established before local sunset. The operation proceeded with military precision. Warriors moved outward in concentric circles, establishing sensor arrays and weapon platforms. The local wildlife, small, furred creatures and avian specimens fled before their advance. Nothing remotely threatening. Perhaps the Coalition's fears were exaggerated, Atrax remarked to Shura as they observed the deployment from a command position. Perhaps, she replied, though it seems strange that... Her words were cut short by a distress signal from the eastern perimeter. 3 warriors had gone silent simultaneously. Atrax immediately dispatched a response team, watching through their sensory feeds as they approached the last known position of the missing soldiers. What they found defied explanation. The 3 warriors, each over 2 meters tall, encased in battle armor that could withstand direct energy, weapon impacts had simply vanished. Their equipment lay scattered across the grass, showing signs of powerful acid corrosion. Before the response team could investigate further, the ground seemed to erupt around them. Grasshoppers, thousands upon thousands of them, leaping in a synchronized swarm that engulfed 2 more warriors before they could react. Atrax watched in disbelief as the insects somehow penetrated the supposedly impervious armor, their mandibles secreting an acid that dissolved both equipment and Vorak flesh with terrifying efficiency. Defensive formation. Atrax commanded through the neural link. Incendiary countermeasures. The warriors responded instantly, deploying flame projectors that scorched the grassland in expanding circles. The grasshoppers retreated, but the damage was done. 5 warriors lost in the first hour of deployment. Impossible, Vell muttered, examining the remains of the dissolved equipment. These are primitive insects. They shouldn't have acid capable of penetrating our armor. Earth classification Deathworld, Shura reminded them coolly. Perhaps we should reconsider our definition of safe zone. Atrax silenced her with a glare. Adjust the armor's molecular structure to resist the acid. Deploy aerial surveillance drones to track insect swarm movements. We adapt and overcome. That is the Vorak way. The next 3 days proceeded without major incident. The expedition established a base of operations, complete with defensive perimeters and environmental monitoring stations. Atrax began to believe the grasshopper attack had been an anomaly, a freak evolutionary quirk in that particular area. Then the wind changed direction. Commander, atmospheric sensors are detecting an unknown particulate, reported the science officer. Organic in nature, spreading rapidly through our position. Pollen, Vell identified after analysis. From those flowering plants on the western perimeter. Harmless, then, Atrax concluded. He was wrong. Within hours, 37 warriors developed symptoms of severe neurotoxicity. Their exoskeletons began to calcify, mobility deteriorating rapidly. The medical team identified the pollen as the cause. Somehow it contained compounds that triggered a catastrophic immune response in Vorak physiology. How, Atrax demanded of his science team. How can simple plant reproduction be toxic to us? Our biology has no evolutionary relationship to Earth's. Convergent evolution, perhaps, suggested the lead scientist. Or deliberate design. Design by whom? Before the scientist could respond, a new crisis emerged. The surveillance drones had detected a large herd of native fauna approaching from the north, massive, shaggy quadrupeds, moving with surprising speed. Bison, identified Shura, consulting the Earth database. Herbivores, supposedly non-aggressive unless threatened. Atrax wasn't taking chances. Deploy heavy weapons on the northern perimeter. Warning shots only. I want to observe their behavior. The weapons teams moved into position, their energy cannons capable of vaporizing targets at 2 kilometers. As the bison approached, they fired precisely calculated shots that impacted the ground 20 meters ahead of the herd. The expected result was that the animals would flee. Instead, the herd split into 3 groups with a coordination that seemed impossible for non-sentient creatures. 2 groups circled to the flanks, while the central mass charged directly at the weapons emplacements. The warriors adjusted their aim, but the bison moved with uncanny agility, somehow anticipating the energy blasts and swerving at the last possible moment. Then, they were among the defensive line, their massive bodies smashing through equipment and warriors alike. One bull, larger than the others, targeted Atrax himself, lowering its horns and charging with unexpected speed. Only Atrax's enhanced reflexes saved him as he leaped aside, firing his sidearm directly into the creature's skull. The bison dropped, but not before goring 2 warriors with its horns. Within minutes, the attack was over, the herd disappearing back into the grassland as suddenly as it had appeared. The damage assessment was sobering: 14 warriors dead, 32 injured, and critical defensive equipment destroyed. They coordinated that attack, Vel insisted during the emergency council. Those weren't random animal movements. Impossible, countered the science officer. The neurological capacity of these creatures doesn't support tactical thinking. Shura's compound eyes gleamed. Unless something was coordinating them. All eyes turned to her. The humans, she continued. Coalition reports indicate they have developed rudimentary animal control technologies. Perhaps they're testing our defenses. Atrax considered this. We've detected no human settlements within 50 kilometers. That we know of, Shura replied. Earth structures can be remarkably well concealed, especially underground facilities. The discussion was interrupted by a new alert. The surveillance drones had detected movement at the edge of their range, small, fast-moving objects approaching the camp. Wolves, identified the sensor operator. Pack predators, according to the database. More wildlife. Atrax's patience was wearing thin. Eliminate them. The warriors deployed with ranged weapons, targeting the approaching wolves. But, like the bison before them, these creatures displayed unnatural coordination and speed. They dodged energy blasts with precision, split into smaller groups, and attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. Unlike the bison, however, they targeted specific systems communication arrays, sensor nodes, power distribution hubs. They're dismantling our infrastructure, Vel realized. This isn't random. They're deliberately sabotaging our technology. The battle lasted less than an hour. The wolves eventually retreated, but not before destroying critical systems and killing another 23 warriors. More disturbing was the method of their attacks. They'd somehow identified weak points in the Vorak armor, targeting joint seams and sensory apparatus with surgical precision. As night fell, Atrax called his officers together. Of the original 1,000 warriors, 891 remained combat effective. Not terrible losses. But the pattern was concerning. We need to consider the possibility that we're being systematically tested, Atrax admitted. These attacks are probing our capabilities, identifying weaknesses. By whom? Asked Vel. We've seen no evidence of human involvement. Perhaps that's the point, Shura suggested. Coalition reports indicate humans excel at asymmetrical warfare. They don't confront superior forces directly. They use the environment itself as a weapon. Atrax's mandibles clicked in frustration. Then we need to draw them out. Tomorrow, we expand our perimeter. If there are humans nearby, we will find them. The night passed without incident. But dawn brought a new horror. The warriors assigned to perimeter duty discovered their armor had been colonized by a rapidly growing fungus. The organic material had somehow penetrated the molecular structure during the night, spreading throughout the systems and interfering with both mobility and life support. 46 warriors lost before the science team could develop a countermeasure. The fungus, they discovered, was not native to Earth. It had been engineered. Its DNA modified to specifically target Vorak technology. Proof of human involvement, Atrax declared. This is no natural evolution. Commander, interrupted the communications officer. We're detecting a transmission, audio only, originating approximately 15 kilometers west. Let's hear it, Atrax ordered. The voice that filled the command center was unmistakably human, speaking in heavily accented Coalition standard. Attention alien invaders. This is Dr. Elijah Harris of the Montana Resistance. You've parked your shiny metal asses on private property. We were willing to overlook that. But then, you started shooting up the local wildlife, which frankly, pisses us off. You've got 12 hours to pack up and leave. After that, things get considerably less pleasant. This has been your only warning. Silence filled the command center as the transmission ended. They're bluffing, Vel said finally. A primitive species threatening Deathworlders absurd. Atrax wasn't so certain. Trace the transmission. I want a strike team ready in 1 hour. Commander, Shura interjected. Perhaps we should consider their offer. We've lost over 100 warriors to simple wildlife and plants. If the humans begin active resistance... We are Vorak, Atrax cut her off. We do not retreat from primitives. Prepare the strike team. 12 warriors, led by Vel, departed toward the transmission source. Atrax monitored their progress through the neural link, watching as they traversed the rolling grassland with weapons primed. They encountered no resistance as they approached the coordinates, finding only an abandoned structure, a small wooden building weathered by time and elements. No signs of recent occupation, Vel reported. The transmission was automated. Search the structure, Atrax ordered. The warriors entered cautiously, scanning for traps or hidden enemies. They found neither, only a simple mechanical device that had broadcast the pre-recorded message. A diversion, Atrax realized too late. Return to base immediately. But even as he gave the command, the neural link with the strike team distorted. Through fragmenting data streams, Atrax witnessed horror unfold. The air around the structure suddenly filled with small, flying insect bees, according to the database. Unlike normal bees, however, these emitted a faint blue glow. Radiation signatures, warned the science officer. Those insects have been exposed to gamma radiation. The radioactive bees swarmed the warriors, their stingers somehow penetrating the armor at microscopic weak points. Each sting delivered not only venom, but radioactive particles directly into the Vorak bloodstream. Within minutes, all 12 warriors of the strike team lay dead, their nervous systems destroyed by the combined assault. And still, no humans had shown themselves. When night fell again, morale among the Vorak forces had deteriorated significantly. 213 warriors lost, with nothing to show for it but dead wildlife and mysterious attacks. No enemy to fight, no objective to secure, just an endless series of environmental assaults that seemed impossible to counter. This isn't warfare, complained one officer. It's pest control, and we're the pests. Shura approached Atrax privately. Commander, we need to reconsider our position. This safe zone is anything but. I recommend a tactical withdrawal to orbit while we reassess. Atrax's mandibles clicked in anger. And report what to the Coalition that the mighty Vorak were defeated by insects and herbivores. No. We adapt and overcome. At what cost? Shura pressed. Half our force, 3/4. How many warriors must die before you acknowledge this mission was based on faulty intelligence? The intelligence wasn't faulty, Atrax insisted. This is the safest zone on Earth. If we can't survive here, No coalition force can survive anywhere on this planet. Their argument was interrupted by a new development. The sensor arrays, what remained of them, had detected multiple small heat signatures approaching from all directions. Not animals this time, reported the sensor operator. The movement patterns are consistent with bipedal locomotion. Humans. Atrax felt a surge of anticipation. Finally, deploy the warriors in defensive formation. Capture protocols. I want prisoners for interrogation. As the Vorak forces prepared for battle, the first visual confirmation came through the surveillance drones. Humans, approximately 30 of them, moving with practiced coordination through the grassland. They wore no standardized uniforms. Instead, dressed in a hodgepodge of camouflage patterns, leather, and what appeared to be animal skins. Their weapons were equally diverse. Some carried projectile rifles that the database identified as primitive chemical propellant firearms, while others wielded implements that didn't register as weapons at all. Survivalists, identified the intelligence officer, consulting the Earth database. Humans who choose to live outside their society's structure, often in preparation for catastrophic events. Primitive resistance, Atrax said dismissively. This should be resolved quickly. The humans approached to within 1 kilometer of the Vorak perimeter, then stopped. For several minutes, nothing happened. The warriors maintained their positions, weapons trained on the stationary humans. Then, without warning, the ground beneath 3 perimeter guard posts erupted in flames. Improvised explosives. The database identified fertilizer-based compounds triggered by pressure plates. Simple, but effective. 17 more warriors lost. The humans didn't advance. Instead, they retreated into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as they had come. They're testing our perimeter, Vel concluded, probing for weaknesses. Or drawing us out, Shura suggested. Commander, I recommend we maintain defensive positions. These hit-and-run tactics suggest they want us to pursue them. Atrax considered both perspectives. His instinct was to launch an immediate counterattack, to crush these primitives, and demonstrate Vorak's superiority. But the mission had already deviated so far from expectations that caution seemed warranted. We hold position, he decided finally. Double the sensor grid sensitivity. I want to know if a single human approaches within 5 kilometers. The night passed in tense alertness, but no further attacks materialized. As dawn broke, Atrax ordered reconnaissance drones to sweep the surrounding area. The footage they returned was perplexing. The humans had established a small encampment just beyond sensor range, making no attempt to conceal their presence. They appeared to be waiting. It's an invitation, Shura observed. They want to talk. Or they want to ambush any delegation we send, countered Vel. Atrax studied the footage more closely. Among the humans, one figure stood out taller than the others, with a distinctive white beard and what appeared to be some kind of protective eyewear perched atop his head. He moved with authority, clearly the leader. Dr. Harris, Atrax guessed, recalling the transmission. Very well. I will meet with this human, but not on their terms. Lieutenant Shura, prepare a communication channel. The human camp received the transmission with visible surprise. Their leader, presumably Harris, listened to Atrax's proposal, a meeting on neutral ground, halfway between the two camps, with minimal escort. The human's response was unexpected. He laughed a sound that the translation matrix identified as indicating amusement or derision. Son, you've lost over 200 of your troops without us firing a single shot directly at you. Harris responded, You're not exactly in a position to dictate terms, but I appreciate the offer. How about this? I come to you, alone and unarmed. You can scan me for weapons, explosives, whatever makes you feel safe. In return, you guarantee my safety within your camp. The boldness of the proposal caught Atrax off guard. Why would you trust us with your safety? Harris's expression shifted to something the database identified as a smile, though it contained no trace of warmth. Because if anything happens to me, my people will rain hell down on your position like nothing you've seen yet. And trust me, what you've experienced so far has been us being neighborly. Against the objections of both Shura and Vel, Atrax agreed to the meeting. 4 hours later, Harris approached the Vorak perimeter, walking with unhurried confidence across the open grassland. As promised, he came alone and, according to the scanners, unarmed. Atrax met him at the edge of the camp, flanked by 6 warriors with weapons at ready. Up close, the human was less impressive than Atrax had anticipated, significantly smaller than a Vorak warrior, with a fragile-looking frame partially concealed beneath layers of cloth. The white facial hair seemed decorative rather than functional, and the skin showed signs of damage from the planet's radiation-spewing star. "Dr. Harris," Atrax greeted him. "I am Squad Commander Atrax of the Vorak Imperium. You have attacked Coalition forces without provocation. Explain yourself." Harris squinted up at him, apparently unintimidated by the fact that Atrax towered over him by nearly a meter. "Without provocation, you landed 1,000 heavily armed troops in my backyard. Where I come from, that's provocation enough." "This territory was identified as minimally populated," Atrax replied. "The Coalition detected no significant human settlements." "That's because we don't want to be detected," Harris said. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. This isn't my first alien rodeo. Your Coalition has been sending expeditions to Earth for decades, and they all end the same way, with dead aliens and Earth getting a nastier reputation. I'm here to offer you something the previous expeditions didn't get a chance to leave with minimal casualties." Atrax's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "You expect the Vorak to retreat from primitives?" "I expect intelligent beings to recognize when they're outmatched," Harris countered. "You're Deathworlders, right? Evolved on some hellscape planet, built to withstand extreme conditions. Impressive. But here's what you don't get. Earth isn't deadly because of extreme conditions. It's deadly because of complexity and adaptation." He gestured to the surrounding grassland. "Every living thing you see has been evolving alongside humans for millennia. We've been manipulating the ecosystem intentionally and unintentionally, creating an environment perfectly tuned to our survival. Those radioactive bees, my wife's project. The acid grasshoppers, my daughter's thesis work. The coordinated bison, we've been selectively breeding them for 15 generations." "You claim responsibility for these attacks," Atrax demanded. "Not attacks, deterrence," Harris corrected. "If we wanted you dead, you'd be dead already. I've got 50 people out there who've been preparing for the end of the world their whole lives. This is literally what they've been training for." "Then why offer terms? Why not simply eliminate us?" Harris sighed, a gesture that the translation matrix identified as indicating fatigue or exasperation. "Because contrary to what your Coalition might believe, we're not bloodthirsty savages. We defend our territory, but we prefer not to kill when we don't have to. So here's the deal: you pull your forces back to your ships, leave Earth orbit, and report to your superiors that this planet is off limits. In return, we let you leave without further losses." The audacity of the proposal left Atrax momentarily speechless. A primitive offering terms to the Vorak Imperium. It was unthinkable. "And if we refuse?" he finally asked. Harris's expression hardened. "Then we stop using deterrence and start using our actual weapons. Trust me, Commander, what you've seen so far has been us pulling our punches." Before Atrax could respond, the perimeter alarm sounded. The surveillance drones had detected multiple incoming projectiles, crude missiles launched from beyond visual range. "That's not us," Harris said quickly, his expression showing genuine surprise. "My people wouldn't." The first impacts struck the eastern perimeter, but instead of explosions, the missiles released a dense, particulate cloud. Biological agent. The sensors warned. Within seconds, 20 warriors collapsed, their respiratory systems failing as the agent attacked the specialized membranes that allowed them to process Earth's oxygen. "Marisol," Harris muttered, pulling a communication device from his pocket. "Damn it! I told her to wait." More missiles followed, striking throughout the camp. Some contained the biological agent, others conventional explosives. Still others a compound that adhered to Vorak armor and rapidly began to dissolve it, similar to the grasshopper secretions but far more concentrated. "Call them off," Atrax demanded, seizing Harris by his clothing and lifting him off the ground. "Call them off now, or die." "They're not mine to call off," Harris shouted back. "That's the Northern Alliance different group, different agenda. Put me down and I'll help you, or we both die here." Atrax hesitated, then released the human. "Explain." "There are multiple human factions in this region," Harris said rapidly. "My group, the Montana Resistance, we're willing to let you leave. Marisol Vega leads the Northern Alliance. They don't offer terms, they just eliminate threats. They must have been watching our meeting and decided I was being too lenient." Another barrage of missiles struck, this time targeting the command center. The casualty reports flooded in through the neural link, 300 warriors down in the initial assault. More falling with each passing minute as the biological agent spread through the camp. "We need to fall back," Shura urged, approaching through the chaos. "Commander, the position is lost." Atrax's mind raced. Retreat was unthinkable, but the alternative was potentially the complete loss of his force. "Where?" he demanded of Harris. "Where can we regroup?" Harris pointed west. "Abandoned mining town, 15 kilometers. Defensible position, solid structures. I can lead you there." "Why would you help us?" Shura asked, her weapons trained on the human. "Because Marisol will kill me along with you," Harris replied grimly. "Once the Alliance starts an operation, they don't distinguish between aliens and collaborators. Right now, I'm as much a target as you are." Atrax made his decision. "Order the retreat. All warriors. Fall back to the following coordinates. Bring essential equipment only." The retreat was chaotic and costly. The Northern Alliance forces revealed by the surveillance drones to be a smaller, but more heavily armed group than Harris's people pursued relentlessly. Their weapons, while primitive by coalition standards, proved devastatingly effective when deployed with precision. By the time the remaining Vorak forces reached the abandoned mining town, they had lost nearly half their original number. The town itself was a collection of weathered structures, arranged around what had once been an excavation site. The buildings were constructed of local materials, wood, stone, and a primitive form of concrete, but offered more substantial cover than the open plains. Atrax established a defensive perimeter, positioning the remaining warriors to cover all approaches. Harris, who had guided them to the location, now stood with Atrax in what had once been the mining operations administrative building. "They'll be here within the hour," the human said, peering through a damaged window. "Marisol doesn't give up once she commits." "How many?" Atrax asked. "Maybe 30 fighters, but they'll have support from the local tribes. Could be another 50 warriors altogether." Atrax's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "You expect me to believe that 80 primitives are a threat to over 400 Vorak warriors?" Harris turned to face him, his expression grave. "Numbers don't matter here, Commander. This isn't about force strength, it's about home field advantage. Every human fighting you knows this terrain intimately. They've prepared for this scenario their entire lives. Your warriors are exceptional, I'm sure, but they're fighting blind on unfamiliar ground." Before Atrax could respond, Lieutenant Shura entered, her exoskeleton bearing the scars of recent combat. "Commander, we've established the perimeter, but our long-range sensors are inoperative. We're effectively blind beyond visual range." "What about the ships?" Atrax asked. "Can we call for extraction?" Shura's compound eyes dimmed slightly, a gesture indicating negative results. "Communication systems are being jammed. Some kind of localized field effect. Very primitive technology, but surprisingly effective. Harris nodded. Faraday cage principles. Marisol's people specialize in communications disruption. Atrax turned his attention back to the human. You claim to want to help us. Prove it. How do we counter this jamming? You don't, Harris replied simply. Not from here. The jamming equipment will be distributed across multiple locations, redundant systems. Even if you knocked out one, the others would maintain the field. Then what do you suggest? Harris hesitated, then said, There's an old communications array on the mountain ridge, about 5 kilometers east. Mining operation used it before they shut down. If we can reach it and modify your transmitter to use the existing infrastructure, we might punch a signal through the jamming. Atrax repeated. You need me to operate the human technology, Harris pointed out, and I need you to get past Marisol's forces. Atrax considered the proposal. It could be a trap, luring him away from his warriors. But the alternative was to remain blind and isolated, waiting for the human forces to attack on their terms. Very well, he decided. Lieutenant Shura, you have command until I return. Maintain defensive positions and conserve ammunition. Commander, Shura objected. Protocol dictates that the commanding officer should not. Protocol has little application in our current situation. Lieutenant? Atrax cut her off. I will return with communications restored, or not at all. Atrax selected 5 warriors to accompany him, the most adaptable of his remaining force. As they prepared to depart, Harris approached with a bundle of fabric. Camouflage, he explained, offering the materials. Your natural coloration stands out against our landscape. This will help. The warriors reluctantly applied the crude coverings to their exoskeletons. The sensation was unfamiliar and restrictive, but Atrax recognized the tactical advantage it provided. They departed through a service tunnel that Harris claimed led toward the ridge, avoiding the main approaches that would likely be under surveillance. The tunnel was cramped and structurally unsound in places, forcing the Vorak warriors to move single file through sections barely wide enough to accommodate their bulky frames. This mining operation, Atrax said as they progressed. What resources were they extracting? Rare earth elements, mostly. Harris replied from his position at the front of the line. Neodymium, dysprosium, stuff needed for advanced electronics. The operation shut down about 15 years ago when Chinese imports undercut domestic production. You allowed a rival nation to control strategic resources. Atrax found the concept baffling. Harris chuckled that strange vocalization again. Welcome to Earth economics, Commander. Strategic considerations usually take a back seat to quarterly profits. Your species' disunity is perplexing. Atrax observed. The database indicates you have no central government. Hundreds of competing nation-states. Thousands of distinct cultural groups. How do you maintain technological progress with such fragmentation? That's our secret weapon, Harris responded. Competition drives innovation. Different approaches to the same problems. Some fail, some succeed. But the successes spread rapidly. It's messy and inefficient, but it works. The tunnel began to slope upward, the air growing fresher as they neared the exit. Harris held up a hand, signaling the group to halt. We're approaching the surface, he whispered. From here to the communications array, we'll be exposed. Marisol's people will have scouts watching the ridge. How do you suggest we proceed? Atrax asked. Wait for nightfall. Their thermal imaging is good, but your body temperature runs cooler than humans. Right. The camouflage should mask you sufficiently in darkness. Atrax consulted his chronometer. 4 hours until local sunset. Unacceptable delay. We proceed now. Harris shook his head. Your funeral. But he continued forward, leading them to the tunnel exit. They emerged into a rocky gully that provided some cover from distant observation. The ridge loomed above them, the communications array visible as a skeletal structure against the sky. Between their position and the objective lay approximately 1 kilometer of exposed terrain, a mixture of scrub vegetation and rocky outcrops. "We move in short bounds," Atrax instructed his warriors. "Maintain maximum dispersion. The human and I will advance first." They began their approach, moving swiftly between available cover positions. For the first 500 meters, they encountered no resistance. Then, without warning, the ground beside Atrax erupted as a projectile struck. The report of the weapon followed a split second later, a sound Harris identified as a high-powered rifle. "Sniper," the human hissed, pulling Atrax behind a boulder. "High ground, 2 o'clock position." Atrax signaled his warriors to pinpoint the attacker. One of them managed to locate the position, a concealed nest among the rocks, approximately 800 meters distant. Before they could return fire, another shot rang out from a completely different direction, striking one of the warriors directly in the sensory apparatus. The warrior dropped, systems failing instantly. "Multiple shooters," Harris realized. "They've got the ridge covered." "How many?" Atrax demanded. "Impossible to say. Could be 2. Could be 10. Marisol's people are good at maximizing limited resources." Another warrior fell to sniper fire as they assessed the situation. At this rate, they would be eliminated before reaching the objective. "We need a diversion," Atrax decided. "Something to draw their fire while we advance." Harris considered for a moment, then reached into his pack and removed several small devices. "Sonic decoys," he explained. "They emit heat signatures and movement patterns that mimic human activity. Won't fool them for long, but might create enough confusion for us to move." He activated the devices and tossed them in various directions. Almost immediately, sniper fire redirected toward the decoys, striking the small machines with precision. "Now," Harris urged, and they sprinted forward, using the momentary distraction to cover nearly 200 meters before the snipers realized the deception. By the time they reached the base of the communications array, Atrax had lost 2 more warriors. Only 3 remained, plus himself and the human. The array itself was a latticed metal structure supporting various reception and transmission equipment, much of it visibly degraded by exposure to the elements. "The control room is at the base," Harris said, pointing to a small concrete structure. "If your communications tech is compatible, we should be able to boost your signal enough to punch through the jamming." They entered the control room cautiously. The interior was dark and dusty, filled with primitive electronics that appeared to have been abandoned mid-operation years ago. Harris moved to a central console and began activating systems. To Atrax's surprise, some of them responded, lights flickering to life. "Backup generators still have some juice," Harris explained. "Enough for what we need." Atrax connected his communication module to the human system as directed. The technological integration was awkward, requiring several adaptations that tested the limits of his engineering knowledge. But gradually, the systems began to synchronize. "Signal strength at 30%, Atrax reported. "Insufficient to penetrate jamming." "We need to elevate your transmitter," Harris said. "The main antenna at the top of the tower would provide enough amplification. One of us needs to climb up and make the physical connection." Atrax evaluated the tower, approximately 60 meters tall, with a maintenance ladder running its length. "I will go," he decided. "My exoskeleton provides better protection against falls." "No," Harris countered. "I know how the system works. It has to be me." Before Atrax could object, the human had taken the transmitter and begun climbing the maintenance ladder. Atrax stationed his remaining warriors at defensive positions around the control room and monitored Harris's progress through his optical enhancements. The human moved with surprising agility, despite his apparently fragile physiology. When he reached the antenna assembly at the top, he began integrating the Vorak transmitter into the existing infrastructure. Atrax could see him working methodically, making connections that bridged the vast technological gap between the two systems. Then, Movement at the edge of Atrax's visual range caught his attention. Human figures, at least a dozen, advancing rapidly toward their position. The Northern Alliance had found them. Harris, Atrax, called through his external amplifiers. Hostiles approaching, complete the connection immediately. Almost there, the human called back. Just need to calibrate the... His words were cut off by a sharp crack, and Harris lurched on the platform. Sniper fire had found him, striking his lower body. But remarkably, the human continued working, his movements now hampered by injury, but still purposeful. The advancing hostiles opened fire on the control room. Atrax's warriors returned fire, their energy weapons cutting through the primitive cover the attackers used. But there were too many, and they were employing coordinated tactics that belied their technological limitations. One warrior fell, then another. Atrax found himself alone in the control room, surrounded by advancing enemies. He prepared for a final stand, weapons primed and metabolic systems flooding his body with combat stimulants. Then his communication system crackled to life. Signal established. Harris's voice came through, weak but triumphant. Transmitting now. Atrax immediately sent the emergency extraction code to the orbiting Vorak vessels. Confirmation came, almost instantly. They had received his signal, and were dispatching recovery craft. But the battle was far from over. The human attackers had reached the control room perimeter, and Atrax could hear them preparing explosive charges to breach the reinforced doors. He had minutes at most before they would overwhelm his position. Movement on the tower caught his attention. Harris was descending, his progress slow and clearly painful. Dark, liquid blood. Atrax recalled from the database, stained the human's clothing where the projectile had struck him. "Leave me," Atrax commanded. "The extraction craft will be here shortly. You cannot survive their arrival protocol." Harris ignored him, continuing his painful descent. When he finally reached the ground, he staggered to the control room entrance, his face pale beneath its covering of facial hair. "Not leaving you to Marisol," he gasped. "There's another way out. Maintenance tunnel, under the main console." Atrax hesitated. The human had proven unexpectedly reliable thus far, but this could still be a trap. Yet the alternative, waiting for the attackers to breach the door, offered little hope of survival. "Show me," he decided. Harris limped to the central console and collapsed beside it, pointing weakly to a concealed access panel. Atrax removed the panel, revealing a narrow passage that appeared to lead deeper into the ridge. "Where does this lead?" he demanded. "Old emergency exit," Harris explained, his voice growing weaker. "Comes out, 3 kilometers east. Should put you beyond their perimeter." "You're coming with me," Atrax decided, surprising himself with the declaration. "My warriors died to complete this mission. I will not abandon an ally who made its success possible." Despite Harris's protests, Atrax lifted the injured human and entered the maintenance tunnel. The passage was even more confined than the previous one, forcing Atrax to crouch uncomfortably as he navigated its length. Harris drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally providing guidance at critical junctions. After what seemed like hours, they reached the tunnel's exit, a concealed opening in the rocky face of the ridge, overlooking a wooded valley. In the distance, Atrax could see the flashes of weapons fire where the Northern Alliance forces were engaging the remainder of his warriors at the mining town. "Your people," Atrax said to Harris, who had regained some awareness. "Can you contact them?" The human fumbled with his communication device. "Maybe, if they're in range." He managed to activate the device and spoke briefly into it. The response was immediate, a burst of human language that the translation matrix rendered as expressions of concern and coordinates for rendezvous. "They'll meet us," Harris said. 2 kilometers north. Can you carry me that far?" "I am Vorak," Atrax replied. "I could carry you 10 times that distance." They set out through the wooded terrain, Atrax moving with as much stealth as possible while burdened with the injured human. Harris's condition was deteriorating, his breathing becoming more labored and his periods of consciousness shorter. When they reached the rendezvous coordinates, they found a small group of humans waiting, three figures dressed similarly to Harris, armed but with weapons lowered. "Doctor," one of them called out, rushing forward as Atrax emerged from the tree line. "My God, what happened?" "Sniper," Harris managed. "Northern Alliance. This alien. He saved me." The humans regarded Atrax with obvious fear and suspicion, but their concern for Harris outweighed their hostility. They quickly established a makeshift medical station, treating Harris's wound with primitive but apparently effective techniques. "Extraction vessels approaching," Atrax informed them, his sensors detecting the distinctive energy signatures of Vorak craft. "You should take cover. The atmospheric displacement will be significant." "What about you?" asked one of the humans, a female with facial markings that appeared to be deliberate pigmentation. "I will return to my people," Atrax stated. Harris, partially revived by the medical treatment, reached out and grasped Atrax's lower appendage. "Don't," he said weakly. "The Northern Alliance has overwhelming force at the mining town. Your warriors, they won't survive." "I cannot abandon them," Atrax insisted. "Then you'll die for nothing," Harris countered. "Marisol has deployed their secret weapon, something they've been saving for a real threat." "What weapon?" The female human answered. "Memetic warfare. They've hacked into your neural communication network. They're broadcasting memes, cultural viruses directly into your warrior's sensory apparatus." Atrax's mandibles clicked in dismissal. "Psychological warfare is ineffective against Vorak discipline." "This isn't standard psychological warfare," Harris explained. "These are specifically engineered cultural concepts designed to infect and replicate within neural networks. Ideas that undermine the foundations of hierarchical military structure. Concepts like individual autonomy and questioning authority, packaged in a form that bypasses rational filters." "Impossible," Atrax declared. But even as he spoke, he detected anomalies in the neural link with his remaining warriors. Fragmented transmissions, emotional states that should have been suppressed by training, philosophical queries that had no place in combat communications. "They're turning your warriors against each other," the female human said, "making them question the mission, question their loyalty, question you." Atrax accessed the command frequency. "Lieutenant Shura, report status." The response came through garbled and distorted. "Commander, situation deteriorating. Warriors, refusing orders. Some have removed neural links. Others, debating mission parameters during combat. We cannot maintain cohesion." In the background, Atrax could hear the sounds of internal conflict, Vorak warriors arguing, even fighting among themselves as the human forces pressed their advantage. "How is this possible?" Atrax demanded of Harris. "Memetic engineering," the human replied. "Marisol's specialty. She studied how ideas spread, how they infect minds. She found similarities between thought patterns and computer code, developed methods to insert exploits into cognitive processes. But our neural architecture is completely alien to yours. Basic cognitive structures are more universal than you think," Harris said. "The need for meaning, for purpose, for agency, these are common to all complex intelligence. Once you understand the fundamentals, you can find the vulnerabilities." The extraction vessels were now visible in the sky, descending rapidly toward their position. Atrax faced a decision unlike any in his military career: attempt to rejoin his disintegrating force and likely perish, or retreat with vital intelligence about an enemy far more dangerous than the Coalition had ever imagined. "Commander," came Shura's voice again, weaker now. "The humans, they've breached the perimeter. Warriors are surrendering. Some are discussing philosophy with the attackers. I can't maintain command. Save yourself. Report what you've learned." The transmission ended abruptly, replaced by static. Atrax turned to Harris. Your people did this. Destroyed my warriors not with weapons, but with ideas. Ideas are the most powerful weapons humans have ever developed, Harris replied. We've been using them against each other for millennia. Your warriors never stood a chance. They've never had to defend against mimetic infection. The extraction vessel touched down 30 meters away, its landing jets scorching the surrounding vegetation. The boarding ramp extended, revealing 2 Vorak crew members in standard ship uniforms. Commander Atrax, one called. We must depart immediately. The human forces are converging on this position. Atrax hesitated, looking from the ship to Harris and his people. You could come with me, he said to the human. The Coalition would value your knowledge. Harris shook his head. This is my home, Commander. For better or worse. But take what you've learned here. Tell your Coalition the truth about Earth. It's not the environment that makes it deadly. It's us. Our adaptability, our diversity, our irrepressible tendency to question everything, even ourselves. And what message shall I deliver from you personally, Dr. Harris? The human's face formed that expression again, a smile, but this time with what appeared to be genuine warmth. Tell them Earth is open to peaceful contact. We're not monsters, we're just really good at defending our home. Maybe next time, try knocking instead of landing an invasion force. Atrax considered this, then made his decision. He removed his command insignia and handed it to Harris. I will return to the Coalition, but not with your message. The human looked confused. What do you mean? I will send my report a complete record of what happened here, but I myself will remain. There is more to learn about your species, about this mimetic warfare, knowledge the Vorak need if they are to evolve. They'll declare you a deserter, Harris warned. A traitor. Perhaps, Atrax acknowledged. Or perhaps they will recognize the strategic value of embedded intelligence. Either way, my decision is made. He approached the extraction vessel and addressed the crew. Return to the fleet. Deliver this data crystal to High Command. It contains my full report and recommendations. The crew members exchanged confused glances, but accepted the crystal. And you, Commander. I am remaining to conduct extended reconnaissance. That is all you need to know. The crew hesitated, but could not directly challenge a commander's orders. They returned to the vessel, which soon lifted off and disappeared into the darkening sky. Atrax turned back to Harris and the other humans, who regarded him with expressions ranging from suspicion to curiosity. So, Harris said finally, What now, Commander? No longer Commander, Atrax corrected. Just Atrax. And now, I learn about humans, about Earth, about ideas that can overcome even Vorak discipline. The female human stepped forward. And what makes you think we'll let you stay, that we won't just kill you like the others? Because Dr. Harris is correct about humans, Atrax replied. You are adaptable, curious. You see potential value where others see only threat. I am offering you something unprecedented, direct access to Coalition technology and knowledge. In return, I wish to understand how your species has survived on a world that should have extinguished you millennia ago. Harris struggled to his feet, supported by one of his companions. It won't be easy. Marisol and others like her will see you as a threat regardless of your intentions. And your biology isn't adapted to our environment. You've seen how vulnerable you are to our plants, animals, microbes. All challenges to be overcome, Atrax said. Is that not the human way? For a long moment, Harris studied him, then extended his hand, a gesture the database identified as a symbolic offer of agreement or peace. Welcome to Earth, Atrax. God help us both. As darkness fell completely, they departed the rendezvous site, moving deeper into the wilderness that humans somehow called home. Above them, Atrax knew, The Vorak fleet would be receiving his report, the sole survivor of 1,000 elite warriors, documenting how Earth had defeated them, not with superior technology or overwhelming force, but with grasshoppers, pollen, bison, wolves, and most devastatingly, ideas. In his report, he had included one final recommendation: reclassify Earth from Class 12 Deathworld to something new, something the Coalition had never encountered before: a civilizational hazard zone. Not because the planet itself was deadly, but because its dominant species had evolved something far more dangerous than any natural phenomenon: culture as a weapon, adaptability as a defense strategy, diversity as an evolutionary advantage. And as he followed the humans into their domain, Atrax realized that the true danger of Earth wasn't that it killed invaders. It was that it changed them, infected them with the very traits that made humans so resilient. If he remained long enough, would he too begin to question authority, to value individual thought over collective discipline, to find humor in adversity? Perhaps that was the real reason Earth had been classified as a death world, not because it killed the body, but because it killed certainty. And in the Vorak Imperium, certainty was the foundation upon which everything was built. He was, Atrax realized, already infected. And strangely, he found himself looking forward to the progression of the disease.